They're organised.
Well, leave the ants alone. They need to eat.
It's just remarkable what they do. They leave behind invisible pheromone trails and somehow convey in those pheromones whether their venture out of the nest was successful, so all of the others can follow them.
Oh, do they really?
Yeah. They also release a different pheromone when they die, which tells all of the others to be on high alert.
Yeah, well, I suppose people do that just by screaming.
Yeah, we do. And ants have two stomachs, a regular stomach and a social stomach. They can feed each other food from their social stomachs through a process called trophallaxis.
Huh, I have a social stomach, actually. I eat way more food when I'm with other people.
When organisms work together to such a massive extent, like ants and wasps and bees, it's called eusociality. Eu means good.
Eusocialism. Socialism for you.
What?
Look, are you going to poison the ants or not?
Maybe we can leave them. We could move. There's loads of them and only two of us. I mean, I think it's only fair.
I'm going to punch you in your social stomach in a second. That's genuinely a conversation we have had living together.
Minus the punching me in the social stomach.
Minus the punching you in the social stomach. But I genuinely remember living with you and there was an ant trail and you just went on this 20-minute tangent about the incredible ecosystem that ants create. And I'm like, yeah, but they're in my goddamn room.
Can we admire them outside
Yes.
where they belong? Yeah. Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast by the Greensboro Commander community. It's the GCP by the GCC and POG, Palms Off Gaming, sponsor of this podcast. We're all uniting forces to help you to have better games of Commander. I'm your host, Walt.
And hello, Commander players. I'm your other host, James. And I just wanted to say at the top of this episode, as I do in every episode, if you like what we are doing, wonderful listener that I'm beaming into your ear or your car speakers, wherever I'm being played from.
Or your ear and your car speakers.
That would be...
Oh, that's normal.
I mean, that's normal. If you're listening to us in your car, I imagine they're coming out of car speakers and into their ears.
It could be vibrations through the steering wheel.
Anyway, if you're not confused by how podcasts work, like Walt is, and you support what we're doing and you want to make sure that the Get Commanded podcast is successful, getting to more people, becoming better, doing more stuff, the best way to do it is signing up to our Patreon. It's definitely the best way to support our content. You can check us out at patreon.com/getcommandedpodcast, and I believe we're actually giving it a bit of a refresh pretty soon.
Yeah, might be a new tier on the way, so keep an eye out for that one, and a few little shufflings around. So worth having a look. If you've already looked before, it might be slightly different next time you have a look.
More benefits for you.
Yeah, for you. That's exactly right. Well, I can see the green light blinking over there, so I reckon we must have an incoming transmission from the deep depths of the galaxy from the Space Commanders. It's time to get commanded.
Many Commander players amass enormous collections of cards with little to no method for organizing them. Your collection should be logically and sustainably ordered, such that finding cards for your Commander decks is straightforward and immediate.
I have a feeling they have a security camera in my office.
You reckon?
I have a huge pile of cards that need to be organized right now on my desk. And it's not like me to have a massive pile like that, but I just have not, with moving and having a new job, I've not had the time to organize, but I've still been playing pre-releases and limited and stuff, so oops.
Well, I mean, spoiler alert, but I reckon not only are they aware of your desk, I reckon they're aware of the desks of all of you out there, you filthy heathens with your unsorted cards. No, I'm not.
Yeah, well, if they're getting mad at me, I've been to some of our listeners' offices and seen their spaces where they keep their collections. My word.
Yeah.
Some of you guys have like mountains of cards. And even like in our Discord server, we get like photos of people sharing like new bling. So they'll hold the phone to the card that they're trying to show off. But in the background,
In the blurry background,
you'll see this pile of cards that are toppling like the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
those who live in glass houses should not throw stones. Look, we all, well, most of us probably, have lots of cards, right? We play a card game. Most of them are probably in decks. Maybe not most of them. I know a lot of people who have a lot of cards that they have not organized. I've also personally helped you to
Many
organize
times.
your collection a couple of times.
Yeah.
We've done the big, pull out all the cards. How are we going to sort them? Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
Throw away a bunch or donate a bunch to the game
Order
store.
a pizza, put a good TV show on in the background, some music, something like that.
I actually love organizing cards, so I'm really glad that the Space Commanders wanted me to have a look at this one.
I think you are definitely going to lead this episode purely because you are an absolute neat freak in every sense of the word.
It's true.
Your desktop is so scrutinizingly organized, let alone that I'm literally looking at a collection right now. It's like in boxes, there is probably like, I reckon 20 cards not in a box. And I bet you any amount of money that they're going in a deck soon. Am I right?
You're right.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, look, I'm probably going to get on the soapbox on this one. It's something I feel really strongly about. I reckon, look, everyone should have a system, I think, is the main thing. We're going to cover sort of definitely the system that I use, which is, I know for a fact, is very similar to the one that you use.
Yeah, well, I remember way back in the day when we were like actually living together, not in the weird skit universe that we formed. That I remember I had a lot of cards, and as I was collecting all these cards, I did form this kind of Wooburg based organization system.
Yeah, you had like sort of a box for white, a box for blue.
Yeah, and then I remember when you started like building more decks and disassembling them, because realistically I actually remember the birth of your organization. Do you remember this? You had, when I first moved in with you, you had an iPad box, like an old, like it was probably like an iPad generation 2 or something like that.
I think it was the first generation iPad.
First gen
actually.
iPad box.
Yeah.
This is like going back some. And Walt's cards, I genuinely kid you not, were rubber band locked in like, they were still like relatively organized in the old pre-constructed decks that they came in. Random lands sorted amongst them, but they were just sat in this iPad box without because the cards didn't fit perfectly. It was just no lid. It was just like being
just an
used as
open
a
iPad
tray.
box. So like the one appeal of putting cards in a box is they don't get dust all over them, and I was like,
Nah, just sat on a shelf.
can't fit.
It was, however, when I came in for that inspection for that share house,
That's how you spotted them.
it was the selling point. I was like, oh, these guys are nerds. That's great. I can live with these guys.
Yeah, it was the pile of magic cards you could
Yeah.
see, and the D&D books just underneath those.
Yeah.
Nerds all,
that's a good
all
throwback.
around. But look, yes, we have since the iPad
Yeah.
box, I have a system now that I use. I'm not going to tell you that it's perfect. I think it's pretty good. You should find a system that works for you. And we're going to suggest a few different systems. We're also going to tell you about a couple of systems that we don't really recommend so highly, just for the pure like amount of time that it requires and how hard it is to find cards for your decks. So the main focus of the way we're going to organize is going to be like assuming that your collection exists so that when you're building a deck or looking for cards for a deck, you can find them as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So as opposed to like, obviously binders are great, but they're mostly for trading and for like showing off cards, like showing your play set of that amazing card that you love, or showing your huge collection of cards from specifically Strixhaven or something. That's what the binder's for.
I think there's like two main approaches you could possibly take to organizing your collection. And one is a functional way of organizing your collection, which I think me and you kind of use a lot more often.
Yes.
We're very like proactive in making sure that the cards we potentially will need to go get in the future are available to us. But then I know there are a lot of you that do listen to this podcast that are big on collecting, which just may not actually want to put the cards that they collect in decks. So there may be a whole nother suite of organization tactics out there for you, and you might already have one that works. And honestly, we're going to focus a lot on the functionality of our organization. But if you're a person that is a big collector, I'm actually really interested to hear from you in our Discord how you organize. Is it based on set? Is it based on the like color system that we're using? Or is it based on like the play set of cards that won you a GP way back in the day, or like, you know, whatever. Like, I'm really curious to know how collectors organize. But yeah, to preface, we're going to go down the more functional route of organizing, because that's what Walt and I, we're functioning Commander players. We actually play the game, we're building decks. Not to say collectors don't, I'm saying like that's what our focus is in this podcast.
Definitely. Well, the first question we should really ask is, why organize our cards? It seems kind of obvious, but when you do not have a system for organizing your cards and they kind of sit haphazardly in various boxes, you lose track of where your cards are. And it means that when we do go to build our commander decks, this is the main issue that we have, is we're sort of like, oh, you know, I'm building a blue-white deck and I know I owned a Hallowed Fountain, the Shockland. I don't know where it is. You shouldn't have that problem. Shocklands are amazing cards that you should be putting in your decks if you own them, if you only care about power. You should know where they are.
Yes, and in the same vein, like if, you know, you wouldn't, for example, put a $20 note in your biscuit tin because that's where it makes sense to put it at the time. And then you go, oh, I want to go get some takeout lunch today. Where did I put that $20 note?
Yeah.
It should be in your wallet. That's where you should find the $20 note. Go get that $20 note and then spend it, just like the way you would be putting a $20 Shockland in some random box.
Yeah.
Okay, point made.
Yes, point made. So look, it's important to organize so we can build our decks, so we can not waste all of our time searching for cards, when really, like, the deck building is to supplement the fact that we play the game, right?
Yes.
That's the main thing we want to do. So we want to get there as fast as we can. So the first question we should ask when we're organizing is, where are we going to put the cards once they are organized? There's only really, in my opinion, 3 places people store their cards.
Sure.
The first one is kind of obvious. In your decks.
Yeah, 100%.
That is a place that your cards exist. It's a place that a lot of them are going to stay. If you have a commander deck that you really love, it's just going to live there, right? That's its new home.
I even know people that take this kind of strategy to the next level, and they only buy like 1 copy of really expensive cards. Like I'm talking like really expensive cards, whether it's like a Wheel of Misfortune, a Wheel of Fortune, or a Dual Land or something like that. But they want to play it in multiple decks. They keep it in a deck and they switch it out when they're like, oh, I'm going to play. You know, I'm playing my Niv Mizzet CDH deck. I've got a Volcanic Island in. All right, now I'm going to switch to my high-powered Brutaclad deck.
Yeah.
I'll take my Volcanic Island out of Niv Mizzet and put it in Brutaclad for this game.
Wow.
So they, instead of having multiple copies, and you could do this by printing proxies or whatever, but they like the real version of the card, which, to be fair, I respect that a lot. I like the real versions of the cards.
We love the physical feel of them.
But yeah, they're using this in-deck collection to be able to know where their copies of certain really expensive cards are, so they don't have to purchase more. Wow. It's a very efficient way of making sure you don't spend $1 billion.
Yeah, it's like a whole system in and of itself. It reminds me of a CDH player I saw in a recent game on YouTube who had this exact system, basically, but he had on the sleeve of each card, he had a bunch of colored dots which corresponded to each of his CEDH decks. So like he had a yellow dot and a black dot and a red dot and a brown dot and an orange dot, like on like his Wheel of Fortune, because he owns like 12 CDH decks, but he doesn't like proxying. So when he's like, oh, I'm gonna play my Godot deck. He's like, okay, find all the red dots on all my cards.
I'm assuming the dot is on the front face of the card, not on the back, because that would be card marking.
Oh no, it's the front.
Cool,
it's 100% the front. Yeah. So yes, the main place your cards are gonna live, or probably the most important, is in your decks. So this is. The other 2 places are, for organizing our collection.
Storage,
yes, exactly. There's the binder is probably a really obvious one. Mm-hmm. I think the main purpose of the binder is for trading, I would say, with a secondary caveat of also storing cards that you just keeping for memento's sake. So whether it's that you just like to show them off, like you got a playset of a card that you really love, or like I was saying, you own every copy, one of every card in Strixhaven, and you want to show off your whole set. Binders are perfect for that. They have a really clear progression. They display the front face of every card.
They're also really good for trading.
Yes.
Which is like another kind of huge facet of our trading card game that we play. If you're wanting to trade your collection to get better cards or upgrade or get specific cards for your decks, then a binder is typically referred to as a trade binder in most game stores, because when you go to the store, if you were to bring a big bulky box, which we might talk about in a second, it's a lot harder to go through that than opening a binder and flicking through it like a catalog in a shop.
Yeah.
Where you can go, oh, I would really like this card. And you can go, yeah, sure, that's like $20 worth of value. Do you mind if I have a look at your binder? And it's very efficient.
The other really big upside to this, as opposed to the box, is that they're much safer. So for expensive cards, they are going to be... You should, by the way, sleeve a card before you put it in a binder. Then it's like super, super secure.
Yeah.
But yes, binders are designed with that in mind. They're supposed to keep the card secure and behind that beautiful plastic screen so they can't get scratches on them and that kind of thing.
Usually,
Whereas,
some good quality ones will have like zips around them as well, so they don't like open randomly and all that kind of stuff.
Totally. Yeah. So yes, the third place that your cards are likely to go, we've just alluded to, which is sort of bulk boxes. These take various different forms. A lot of game stores sell those kind of long, thin boxes. They're like almost exactly the height and width of a Magic card, sort of sitting on its side.
Yeah.
And then you can just kind of stack them all the way along this box. Sometimes they're like, a foot long, sometimes
cards.
like 2 feet long. Like,
Yeah,
a lot of cards will go in there.
Yeah, some of them are like 1,000 cards, but you can get like trays of them, which are like, 6 boxes in one.
And then you can sort of pull out the trays one by one.
Exactly. They're pretty good. And like, honestly, game stores sell these for like $1 or $2 a pop.
Yeah.
So ask because they're probably storing a lot of their cards in this, because I know like a lot of game stores, like our local game stores, sell singles, as most do. They got to store them somewhere too. You can just ask the person behind the counter at your local game store, hey, do you have any storage boxes I could buy?
Yeah.
And if you like the sound of, keeping a bulk of your collection and putting them in bulk boxes, they're definitely behind the counter at your store.
Yeah, absolutely. I think bulk boxes are probably going to form the main part of the where we're going to be organizing cards for in this episode, which is for deck building, right? So the binder, like we said, is great for trades, great for showing off cards, not so great necessarily for building a deck, as opposed to a bulk box where you can, and it's a bit of a spoiler, but, if you have a box full of blue cards and you're building a blue commander deck, you can just pull out that box and that's got all your blue cards in them. So yes, most of our collection in terms of this episode and putting them in places where they make sense is going to be into those bulk boxes. So before we get to how we're going to organize into those bulk boxes, I thought we should outline a couple of ways of organizing that we don't recommend. Again, this is specifically for organizing your collection for building decks.
For functionality purposes.
Functionality, yes. The functionality of deck building. And the first one is organizing by set. I know a lot of people have really fond sort of attachments to particular sets, and that's totally fine. And again, these are only suggestions, but keep in mind that we play a format, and most formats are like this. In fact, all of them, I believe, where any printing of a card is legal if the card itself is legal. So let's say you play, even if you play Modern and you don't play Commander, and you want to put your Lightning Bolt in a deck, you can play, you could play like Core Set 2011 Lightning Bolt. You could also play an Alpha Lightning Bolt if you really, really wanted to.
If you want to be a baller.
Yeah. You can play any printing of Lightning Bolt that is, Magic legal, like it's been printed by Wizards of the Coast, and that is legal in your modern deck because the card itself is legal. So a lot of people, when they talk about like sorting by set, are like, oh, then I can easily find cards for Modern or easily find cards for Standard. And it's like, that's great, but you might have like 5 copies of Muldrifter, but they might all be from different sets. So now when you're looking for Muldrifter and you're like, man, I need that playset of Muldrifters, you're like, okay, I'll check my Lorwyn box, and then I'll check my Core Set 2011. That's not very intuitive to building a deck.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I also think that there is a little bit of value by organizing by set that I don't want to kind of undermine, because we did say that we're organizing for purpose and we're organizing for functionality. And for Commander, 100%. However, Cube is a really interesting format that I know a lot of people organize by set. So if you're going to jump in the Discord and say, no, but if I want to build a Kamigawa block set or whatever like that, I need to be able to jump into I need to find the sets, then by all means do that. But as a reminder, this is a Commander podcast.
Yes. For Commander, it's not something that's going to affect you very often.
Yeah.
And speaking of Commander, in terms of looking for those multiple printings of cards, don't forget we have cards like Solemn Simulacrum, which have been printed like 80 times in different products. So if you were going to try and organize into Commander 2011, Commander 2012, Commander 2013, guess what? There's a Solemn Simulacrum in every single one of those boxes now.
Correct. Also, there is a bit of value in organizing them all into the same place. So if all of your... I really like having particular arts in decks. Like I try and make sure that art fits it fits thematically in the commander deck that I'm building. So when I go into a deck, let's say I'm running, I don't know, what's a commander staple? A Swords to Plowshares, for example. There's a couple of different arts of Swords to Plowshares, and I will have a look at my copies of Swords to Plowshares and go, I want this one specifically for the deck.
Yeah.
Even stuff like, I know you're a big fan of like old white border cards and, in certain decks. So if you're going down heavy on the white border stuff, you will have all of your rampant growths together, but you can find your white-bordered rampant growth that you really want to put in the deck.
That's true. It does make that process faster as well. The other so that was organizing by set. The other method we don't recommend quite so highly is using only binders. So this is sort of if you were organizing your collection and when it got to the end, you're putting them all away, rather than having a binder or, a couple of binders or a few binders, and then some boxes, you just put them all in binders. The main thing is this is going to cost you so much money.
Yes.
An absurd amount of money. And also in terms of the amount of space that they're taking up, like a binder is not a very space efficient way of storing your cards.
Well, like I said before, like one of those like cardboard boxes can sometimes, like the really, really basic ones can fit like 1,000+ cards.
Yeah.
A binder
you're not going to find a binder that can do that.
360 is like a good kind of, like big binders will fit like 500 maybe.
Yeah.
But they're big binders.
Very big binders.
They're huge.
Yeah.
Also, this is just really inefficient. If you go to if you start wanting to build your deck, and remember, we're going down this functionality route. If you sit down at your, at your dining table or your office desk or whatever it might be where you build your commander decks, and you need to open up your collection, instead of putting like 2 boxes next to you where you can like pull a couple of cards out, fan through them, put them back in the box, you now have to open a massive book. Like I'm talking, Oxford Dictionary in the library style, massive. When you turn the page, it goes douche when it lands on the actual other side of the table, and then have to page through that. It is really inefficient.
Yeah,
really inefficient.
It's going to take you so much more time, definitely. Okay, that's all of the sort of preamble stuff out of the way. So let's say we're ready to organize now. Okay, we've got our boxes ready. Maybe we've got a binder for the trades that we want to set aside as well, and we've got our huge pile or our huge box of unsorted cards that we need to go through.
James's desk right now.
So, how are we going to organize the cards? Well, we've kind of spoiled it already, but what's one of the most crucial aspects of the format that we play of Commander?
Color identity.
Color identity. If you're playing a white deck, you can only play cards that are in your Commander's color identity. Cards that produce white or have white pips on them, that kind of thing. So, the most logical way to organize our collection for building decks for Commander is by color identity. So, we pull out all of our cards and we're sorting them. How are we going to sort them? We're going to put them into Wurundjeri order: white, blue, black, red, green by color. Each card is going to go into one of those piles. We're also going to have a multicolored pile. So this is a pile that will just have all the multicolored cards. We can organize them by color internally later.
Yeah, so once you've got that pile, you can then individually go into that pile and group them into the 10 2-color pairings.
Yep.
And then the however many 3-color pairings there are. I think there's also...
I don't know how many. There's a few.
Naya and Grixis and all that stuff. How many?
I don't know.
I can't remember. Check EDH Rec.
Yes. Yes. So those are our piles. We've got white, blue, black, red, green, multicolored, colorless. So most of this is going to be artifacts, obviously, here.
Unless you're organising Zendikar.
Yes.
Like from way back in the day. Lots of Eldrazi's.
This one's a little bit iffy where it's not all artifacts are going to go in here, in my opinion. It's actually going to be more logical to do this by color identity still. So for instance, like Marble Diamond, this is the 2-mana rock that enters taps for white. I actually think that's better off going in your white pile because you can only play that in white color identity decks. And likewise for a card like Timeless Lotus, which taps for Wurundjeri colors. It is colorless itself, the card, but in terms of its color identity, it's 5 colors. So you should probably put that with the 5 color cards.
Yeah, I differ slightly here.
Sure.
I generally put color producing mana rocks, with their, color identity. So Marble Diamond is definitely going to go on a white commander deck.
Yep.
But for mana rocks that can produce any color, I'll generally put them in colorless.
That's
because
fair.
If I'm building my blue commander deck, I can also get out my... artifacts, so then I can see, even if it taps for a mana of any color, it's not 5 color, it could just be blue.
Yes, I see what you mean. Yeah, like sort of your Arcane Signet kind of thing.
100%.
Theoretically, it's a 5 color rock, but also you could play that in your mono blue deck.
And most people do.
Yes, a lot of people will. That's a good point. Yep, I like that a lot. Okay, so that's that's pretty organized already. So that, to be honest, I think that's a good first pass.
Yeah. And when you do this first section, like genuinely, it's really kind of cathartic to do. Grab that pile of cards that are on my desk specifically. Please go through them. And you can literally, on your playmat, I generally organize them in Wooburg order. So I'll have my, like when I say Wooburg, in the color pile, do it in a big circle.
Oh, you do?
And
It's quite satisfying to look at, actually.
Yeah, so I organize it. I put the white ones at the top. I put the blue ones in the top right-hand corner. The black ones in the bottom right-hand corner, and go round in the circle. And as I'm organizing, I can kind of see these piles form.
That's fun.
And it's really satisfying. And then I usually put like a pile of colorless at the top, multicolored in the other side.
There's a couple of other piles I just realized we forgot to mention, which is lands. Should definitely be pulled aside here. You just have a whole pile of lands. We'll go into how to sort those specifically. And also tokens are going to be another one that we're going to pull out. The other one that is worth mentioning here, because they do technically fall into multiple piles, modal double face cards, specifically the ones from, for instance, like Zendikar Rising, like the ones that have a spell on one side and a land on the back. Again, by color identity, a card like Malakir Rebirth, this is a black card.
Correct.
I would just put it in your black spells. Don't put it with your black lands.
I 100% agree. Also, this kind of jogs your memory when you're building your deck and when you're going through the cards that you have in your collection while you're building, to include these MDFCs.
Yeah.
Because, like, if I come across a Shatterskull Smashing in red and I've got one in my collection, I'm like, yeah, that's going in.
Yeah.
100% that's going in.
It should prompt you.
Not even in like a really damaged base deck, but this is a removal spell with a land on the back.
We've talked so much about how much we adore these cards. You should be playing more of them than you are, for sure. The other thing we're going to do next, so that's our piles. White, blue, black, red, green, multicolored, colorless, lands, tokens. It sounds like a lot. When you're organizing, it becomes very, very quick to put cards into those piles. Next, we're going to separate, and this is going to make a big difference for finding cards quickly later. Separate each of those piles, specifically the colored piles, so we're not touching lands or tokens yet. Actually, do this for tokens as well. God, it's getting confusing. Creatures and non-creature spells.
Right, yes.
This is going to do a really good thing. The thing you realize about doing this is that about half of all the cards they print in Magic are creatures.
Yeah.
So this very quickly just segments each color super obviously, like it's not hard to get your head around, into creature, non-creature.
Yeah, this is actually, I mean, I have now gotten into a habit when I'm organizing the bulk of my collection that I can pile the white cards together, but start the piles of creature and non-creature while I'm shifting.
In the first pass?
In the first pass through, yeah. Just because that way it kind of already takes care of that split. But yeah, like Walt said, you realize so many creatures exist in Magic the Gathering and non-creature. And that includes all the planeswalkers, all the artifacts that are in your color identity, like the artifacts that are specific in, like, that have a blue pip, for example.
Yeah.
That is a non-creature in blue. The instants, the sorceries, the enchantments, planeswalkers, there's like so many non-creature different types, but in the end it's about 50-50 on creatures.
And it's also gonna, it's very intuitive split, right? Like we sort of know when something is a creature and when it's not, so it's not going to be difficult to go like, oh, preordain. Oh, that's a 1 mana sorcery. That's going to be with my non-creature stuff.
Hot tip, if you want to go through them really, really quickly, when you've got your cards in your hand, turn them upside down so the power and toughness is in the top left-hand corner, and as you fan through the cards, you can very quickly see if something has a power and toughness.
Wow, good one.
It is a very good tip. However, with Kamigawa, the recent set had a lot of vehicles in it. This is a bit of a bitch to work around because it's still got the power and toughness in the top corner. But
vehicles are so weird. They're technically non-creature spells, but they are so like creatures in the way
the
that
card
we think about
looks
them.
like a creature. They have a power and toughness box.
So strange.
But yeah, hot tip. Use the power and toughness box as your quick visual cue of like, oh, this is a creature, this is an instant, this is a sorcery.
Yep, I like that a lot. So yes, that's our further segmentation. Creature, non-creature in each of those colors and in the tokens. And then we're going to organize our lands. So lands, this is how I do it, and in my opinion, it makes a lot of sense. I have all the basic lands in one big chunk in one of my boxes by Wooburg order. So
me too.
White, blue, black, red, green.
Yep. Can also be used for draft then.
Yes. Yeah, you can just pull out a chunk of them and you're good to go. Then I have in Wurundjeri order, one color utility lands. So like the cycling lands, the ones that are, you know, like...
Or the hideaway lands.
Yeah, the hideaway lands. So any of these lands that produce only one color, but are utilities. And they're not basic, but they only produce one color. I have them in Wurundjeri order again. So white, blue, black, red, green. Then I will have like fetch lands, like Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, that kind of thing, that don't have a color identity, the kind of colorless lands. I'll also have colorless lands right there. And then I will go 2 color lands in the color pairing order, then 3 color lands, and then I go rainbow lands, like Command Tower, Path of Ancestry, Exotic Orchard, lands that can produce a mana of any color, theoretically. And that's how I would do the lands, and I'll go into in a little bit why that'll be so helpful later when we're building a deck, but that's, pretty similar to how we organize the rest of our collection, but you just do sort of a smaller version of it for your lands.
Yeah. I think that when you're done with all of these like big things, I think there's like a lot of different steps you need to go through that we're going to kind of, like we've already kind of outlined. So I reckon it's pretty... Like, let's try and break it down very simply.
Sure.
I reckon we can break this down into like 3 or 4 steps.
Yep. All right, let's do it. So we've got our big pile of cards in front of us on the desk. We're going to organize them. So separate them all out by color. So white, blue, black, red, green, multicolored, colorless, and then we also are putting aside lands and tokens. That's the first step. That one's done.
I reckon step 2 would be then make sure that those piles be split into creature and non-creature.
Yes.
And then when you get to your lands for this section, do it via color identity.
Yep.
Because that's pretty easy.
Yep. That's... Put them away is kind of the third step. Put the cards wherever you're going to keep them.
So 3 steps, but step 3 is just like put them on a shelf.
Yeah, step 3 is you're done.
Yeah.
So it's really not that complex when you break it down like that. Now I want to outline the benefit of organizing in this way by having like a little bit of like an imagined scenario, like a thought experiment.
Sure. Okay.
So let's say that me and you, or one of us, whoever, we're going to build a mono blue Spellslinger deck.
So probably me.
Yeah, probably. High chance. High chance. So we have our collection all organized in this way. We're building a mono blue deck. We know it's going to be Spellslinger. If our collection is organized the way that we've just outlined, there are only 4 places we need to go to find the cards for this deck, right?
To build the entire deck.
To build the entire deck.
Any other boxes.
Yeah. So we're going to go to our blue color identity creatures, our blue color identity non-creatures. We're going to go in probably a different box, the artifacts and colorless stuff that we might want to play. And then we're going to look at blue non-basic lands and I suppose fetches.
If you want to thin the deck.
If you wanted to thin the deck or you had some sort of benefit to playing fetches. But that's it.
Yes,
that's our whole deck in 4 places.
Yeah, and in most situations, I found that when I was organizing creature, non-creature, both of the blue creatures and the blue non-creatures would actually go in the same box, but they'd have a divider in them.
Yes.
So realistically, it's like 3 boxes that I would be grabbing.
Maybe 2, really.
Because lands and, they could have a divider
artifacts
in it.
Or something,
Yeah, but like in the same vein, let's say we were, that I started building this mono blue deck and I found a better Is It commander that does it just slightly better and I wanted to build red blue. I now just need to go and get, while I'm building this deck, I just need to go get my red creatures and non-creatures, and then I need to get the multicolored box and go specifically to the section of Is It colored cards.
Yep, and then maybe look at the blue-red lands if you wanted to as well. But that's, again, very few steps given what our collection might have looked like before, being a huge pile of unsorted cards.
And also, how much more efficient is it? I used to hate when I would build decks. Like, I remember, like, really way back early on when I used to just buy booster boxes and just would have like a random booster box from maybe like Armand Ket just sat there unorganized. It, like, opened all the packs, but the cards were just sat in the old box. And I'd be building like a red-green deck and I'd be fanning through the cards. I'd be like, I don't need any of these white cards. I'm wasting my time looking at them or even reading them.
It's kind of irritating and it is basically a waste of your time, to be honest. Now, I will say that me and James, relatively speaking to a lot of you people out there, probably have, and me especially, quite small collections in the grand scheme of things. So that amount of segmentation we've just done, I think that's a good baseline, especially if you have a smaller collection. That's probably going to be enough. 100%. But if you own a really large collection, you may want to segment it a little bit further. Do it based on what makes the most sense to you. So I know some people who have then, once they have, blue creatures, blue non-creatures, they've gone alphabetical order.
Good, that's a lot of work, but you can do it.
It's a lot of work, but that means, when you go, I'm looking for preordain, you go, okay, cool. Blue non-creatures go to P, there's preordain. That's pretty intuitive. I think mana value makes the most sense to me.
Yes, I
personally.
think, especially when you're building commander decks, you can almost identify your curve through knowing your collection so well. You're like, right, now that I'm in the 7-drop section, what cards am I looking for in here that really work for my deck specifically? I still think functionally, this is a really functional way of building your collection out.
Yes, definitely. I will say that my collection actually is segmented a bit further. I don't do mana value or alphabetical order. And this is just an example of how you can customize this method based on what makes the most sense to you. I play a lot of Pauper, as we've talked about a few times on this show. And so my creature non-creatures in each of those sections is actually separated by Pauper legality.
Yeah.
So I have commons and cards that have been printed at common in one section towards the back. And at the front, I have all the cards that are, mythic rares, cards that are not legal in Pauper. So if I'm building a Pauper deck, I know exactly which part of each box I can go to search for cards.
And I think this is something to take into account as well. And I know I did allude to it at the start of the episode, but if you play other formats than Commander, maybe have a think of how you can segment down further into that specific format.
Yeah.
A lot of Commander players generally play longer Eternal formats. I know a lot of Commander players love Pauper at the moment. I love Pauper as well. But maybe you're playing Modern, or even if you're building a cube, think about how you're organizing that cube specifically. Think about when you're organizing your collection, you might want to have specific lore categorization. So if you're building like a Ravnica block cube, maybe go through your collection and build like a separate block, a bulk where it's all your Ravnica cards or something like that.
Absolutely. There's also a bunch of digital collection trackers out there like Mana Box, Dragon Shield, Moxfield have a collection feature now that's also good.
Super handy.
Really great for those massive collections and having a digital way of knowing what all the cards are.
It is a lot of work, but it pays dividends.
It does. But and this is the soapboxy part of the episode. We've covered all the sorting your cards. I'd like to get on my soapbox a bit for the second half, James. In my opinion, the absolute best way for you to find your cards more quickly is to own way less of them.
Screw you, don't touch my cards.
Way less.
So you're about to tell us to throw out all our cards?
Yes, and I believe the name of this episode is likely to be throw away all your cards. So I apologize if you've had to wait this long for this part of the episode. You're going to have to wait a little bit longer because it's time for us to take a
thrifty interlude. Hell yeah. I love the synchronicity we're forming on these ones.
Maybe the next episode we can just say everything together at the same time.
Just, verbatim.
We are Walt and James.
Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast. All right, well, look, we've got a lot left to cover, including Walt's complete and utter, dramatically horrific statement that you should throw away your cards.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about, how to build a sustainable collection in the next half. But before we do that, we're going to hear a little something about a thrifty card, right?
Yes, we are. And as is tradition, I will be bringing this card to life, in this case, in the form of a monologue. James, would you like to read the card that I'll be featuring this week?
I would. It's a counterspell. I'm all about these ones. You're more than happy to read it. The counterspell is Familiar's Ruse. For blue and a blue, you get an instant that says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, return a creature you control to its owner's hand. Counter target spell.
I'm a little trickster and I'm going to trick you. Oh, hello there. My name is Gideon Paul Jonathanson. I am an esteemed accountant with the Orzov Syndicate, and I am here to look after your financial bookkeeping. I am a responsible young human man, with a most prodigious reputation of orderly organization of numbers within spreadsheets, such that all of the columns may be multiplied most readily into logical and reasonable figures. My colleagues describe me as unstoppable, unflappable, vociferous, and and psychologically indestructible. Now, if you would just hand over your books, I will ensure that the utmost care is taken in delivering to you a most prosperous financial year. Thank you. See, finally my plan may be made manifest. I have collected every single financial record from this entire district of Ravnica, and with them I will enact my most nefarious plot. I'm going to pour on the pages. Get budgeted.
Oh, there's like, you were right.
It's quite a
strain on the vocal cords. That character. I'm also very happy to confirm with every listener that this is now law on Ravnica. This Gideon Paul Jonathanson is a real character from the Orzhov Syndicate. My lord. There's like very few thrifty interludes that I can like. Most of them I can like hold my laugh to the end. I had to like bite my fist for that one. That was horrific.
I'm flattered. Well, you can catch these posts in text form as I write them over on Discord, and you can also follow us on TikTok at @G_Commander Community to see these. Some of them brought to life in video form. That is definitely one I would like to do as a video. So keep an eye out for that one.
Would like full costume for that as well. I would really like to see that.
Psycho fairy costume. Beautiful. Well, as promised, I would like to get up on my soapbox.
So, should I just leave the room and come back when you're done? Because I know that you're very passionate about this. Mm-hmm. So, where we last left off before the interlude, you were saying that we should throw away a lot of our cards to make it, quote, easier to organise. Yes. Was what you were saying.
Yes. I mean, I say throw away. I'll go into later what we'll actually do with your cards if you're going to get rid of them. I'm not saying put them in the bin. But yeah, basically my thesis here is the best way to organize your cards in terms of the function, like we were talking about, of finding cards for your decks easily, without strain, very little time commitment, is to own way lesser than you currently do.
Look, I get the thesis statement, but I would like to hear your rationale before I decide to, get rid of, however you want to tell me to get rid of them, all of these cards that I have paid for in drafts or, pre-releases. I will give you the floor.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'd like to start with a story. This is a bit of a parable that I heard a few years ago that I think sort of applies a little bit here. It's called, online at least when I found it, it was called The Story of the Two Monks. So,
has one got prowess?
Yeah, if you'd like to, you can think of them as being from a plane.
There's Monastery Mentor and the Monastery Swiftspear. There you go. They're the two monks.
It's Tarkir all over again. A senior monk and a junior monk were travelling together. At one point, they came to a river with a strong current. As the monks were preparing to cross the river, they saw a very young and beautiful woman also attempting to cross. The young woman asked if they could help her cross to the other side. The two monks glanced at one another because they had taken vows not to touch a woman. Then, without a word, the older monk picked up the woman, carried her across the river, placed her gently on the other side, and carried on his journey. The younger monk couldn't believe what had just happened. After rejoining his companion, he was speechless, and an hour passed without a word between them. 2 more hours passed, then 3. Finally, the younger monk could contain himself no longer and blurted out, "As monks, we are not permitted a woman. How could you then carry that woman on your shoulders?" The older monk looked at him and replied, "Brother, I set her down on the other side of the river. Why are you still carrying her?"
Ooh, that's like wisdom incarnate. I like that.
So it's a story about the way that we carry negative ideas, right? It's using the physical act of carrying someone as a representation for the fact that you carry
this burden, this
the burden of thoughts.
It's a metaphor of the burden of thoughts, and it's really quite the way it ends with the "why are you still carrying her?" Because the older monk has taken on this philosophy of once I've done something, I can put it down and let it go and move on.
It's behind me.
It's behind me, and I'm assuming you're about to say just like the chaff that sat on my desk.
Well, I would like to propose that having an enormous amount of cards is a burden. And I don't mean just physically. I mean like in terms of what it brings you. It's often a burden that we carry willingly, right? Having loads of cards. They're stories and they're games that we associate with those cards that imprint themselves in our memory. We recognize them.
They're quite emotional connection.
Yeah, they
at
bring
times.
about fond memories. But the most of the cards that we have in our collection are not those cards with emotional and integral magic memories imprinted on them. They are cards that fill our space and fill our time. Because that's the other thing we were talking about earlier, is when we're searching for cards, the reason we're organizing is to reduce the amount of time we're spending looking for cards, reduce the amount of mental effort that's required to find cards that we want to use. And I would like to propose that having this enormous amount of cards gives you a mental burden of, oh crap, I've got to find that preordain. How am I even going to start?
Yeah, well, look, I'm starting to see where you're coming from, because I have had in the past a lot bigger collection than I currently have now. And I used to go about building decks in a very, like, it would require a lot of mental energy for me to, like, get into the deck building headspace, because I had to dive into, like, boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of cards, and that's like a lot of stuff to sort through. And yeah, like, they were like reasonably organized, but like even the organization of that many cards, I had to flick through them all. Yeah, and that was a lot. And there was cards in there that like I would never play and have never played, because a while ago I did get rid of them all, and it has made like the process of me looking through my collection of what I have got a lot easier to get into the deck building headspace.
Well, this is the thing that it brings about, I think, is wouldn't you rather own a collection where you can point to almost every single card that you have and go, either this has tangible worth to me as a card in the game that I play, like in a deck I'm going to build, or a deck that I'm currently workshopping, or a deck I'm going to build in the future, like it's got tangible worth like that, or it has a really integral memory tied to it. Wouldn't you rather every single one of your cards is one of those? Because this is the thing, when you have that many of the cards, you're sort of thinning the emotional worth of the cards that you have by spreading them so widely.
Yeah, I mean, look, like I think there's a lot of philosophy that's come about in recent years, and I know that like I've been talking about philosophy a lot on this podcast recently, but like minimalism has come into fashion a lot about the way people live, and a lot of people are dedicating themselves to not having any like even photos on the wall or stuff like that, and like really cutting down on the stuff they really need and the stuff that they genuinely really give a fuck about, like really have an emotional connection to. Yeah. Like all the trinkets that are on your shelf or on your windowsill. Like, when was the last time you appreciated any of those? It can tie in. These lessons that we learn from Commando really do tie in with our lives.
Yeah, and I am going to wrap it up towards the end with how I do tie this to my specific life. So keep an eye out for that one as well. So, let's say we want to go through this process of reducing our collection a bit, and I think you should. How would you go about it? Well, when you're looking at a card, and you can do this probably while you're sorting, or maybe afterwards, it's up to you. I think you can honestly ask yourself 3 questions, and if the answer to all of them is no, you should probably get rid of them. So, do you have an existing deck that you think you might put this card in the very near future? So this is like, you know, I've got a Reese the Redeemed deck, and I have this card I'd really like to try. I haven't found the room for it yet, but I'm going to give it a go sometime soon. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Not like, oh, maybe someday I might need it in that deck. Like, specifically, I know the deck it's going to go in. It's going to happen soon.
I will test it.
Yeah, that's question 1. Question 2. Are you planning to build a deck in the near future that will definitely play this card? Be realistic. So this is the other reason to keep a card, right? Like, you don't have a deck for it yet, but I'm going to build an Enchantress deck soon myself. Yep. I might have a bunch of enchantment cards in my collection and go like, oh, actually, I definitely want to try that one. You know, that's a reason to keep that card.
Okay, this is maybe where I take slight disagreement with you. Sure. I get what you're saying about like, is this going to be playable in the future? I think that there's like a distinction between, is this card playable and is it going to be used for a deck that you are planning to build? There's a distinction between those two. For example, Enchantress cards, like I at the moment have no interest in building an Enchantress deck. Sure. But I do have a Cedizan's Champion, which is like a staple in Enchant Enchantress decks.
Yeah, this is when an enchantment ETBs, you draw a card and put a +1 counter on him. Yeah,
it's so good. It's a typical Enchantress card that when you basically cantrip every enchantment.
Yeah.
So I have no interest in building an enchantment deck right now at all. But I keep that card based on the fact that in the future I might want to build an enchantment-based deck.
Interesting.
Because that's an absolute staple, and plus it's worth a few dollars.
Well, if it's worth a few dollars, my argument would be you should put it in your binder.
That's fair.
And then get a card that you feel you're definitely going to use now. But anyway,
that's fair.
You could definitely temper all of this with your own specific way of looking at it. But I'm trying to go to the extreme here to shake you out of whatever a number of cards you're currently keeping. If I can move you just a little bit closer to where I am, any of you out there on the sort of spectrum of throw away all your cards and keep all your cards, then I will consider it a success.
I understand what you're saying, because I think that more Commander players are in the very extreme camp of I'm not throwing away anything. Like, you know, they will have just cards lying around the house. Like, in the kitchen, there will be a stack of cards from a draft they came home from the other night.
Yes.
Like, I think Commander players do fall into that camp. So I'm glad you're taking this step, but I'm only trying to provide some, like...
No. Go, you
go
do
on.
you.
Okay,
Absolutely.
what's the third and final question you have to ask yourself then?
Do you have a strong personal reason to keep a copy of this card? So I have a bunch of cards.
Sure.
I have actually a specific section of my box of cards that I keep, or
really?
boxes that's just sentimental value. Because I talked about this a couple of times on the podcast, but I started playing Magic when I was like 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah.
Like 7th edition.
Yeah, 7th edition.
7th edition roughly was when I was playing... started playing Magic. I didn't know the rules very well. I was certainly not a good player. I didn't play stand. I didn't play anything. I just played kitchen table with my brother mostly.
Unsleeved on the driveway.
All these cards are beat up. They're awful commons, but they have a lot of personal value to me because I remember the games I played with them when I was a kid. I have a good, if we're looking at a pile of cards, it's probably like 10 centimeters tall.
I'd love to go through them after this episode.
Yeah, no,
I'm
happy to.
Curious to see them.
Happy to. So those are the 3 questions. Do you have an existing deck that the card's going to go in? Are you planning to build a deck in the near future that will use this card? Do you have a strong personal reason to keep a copy of the card? If the answer to all 3 of those is no, in my opinion, you should get rid of the card. But like, let's say, worst case scenario, you get rid of a card, like let's say it's a Testing Champion, right?
Sure.
For the sake of argument, let's say you traded that card away. And later down the track, you need it for a deck. You decide, I'm going to build an Enchantress deck, I'm going to build like the Sultai Frog Enchantress deck, K-Me.
Yeah, it's such a cool deck. I want to break it somehow, but it's really hard to break.
I've tried building it, it's hard to break. Let's say you decide you're going to build that, you want that Testing Champion back.
Sure.
So you have to trade for it or buy it somewhere. Well, in my opinion, there are 2 camps that you can fall into here. If it's a high value card, so you said Ceded Champion's worth a few dollars, you've probably recouped the cost of that, right? You've either sold it to someone or you've traded for it.
Yeah.
So like you're probably net 0-ish on that card. It might have changed price a little bit, but you're roughly where you were.
So what you're saying in that situation is you never go down on the value of your collection because you either got physical money for it and got compensated for it, or you traded it and you got like a card that's in one of your decks now and is playing. So you've got the value of having that card. Yeah. Like the value, the actual monetary value.
Yeah, you've gotten something out of it, basically. Sure. I won't say you'll always net 0 money because you can trade a card and then it goes up in price. That can happen.
I have. For example, I traded you a borderless Jeska's Will.
Oh, for like $5?
Yeah.
It's like $40 now or something? Yeah.
Yep.
Still feel bad about that.
Yeah, so you feel bad about that. Yeah, imagine how I feel.
But look, if you, speaking of burdens, thinking about the financial value of doing trading in Magic the Gathering, that is the worst mental burden you could possibly carry. So you should drop that right now anyway. So that's one of the camps, right? It was high value, you traded it, you got some money out of it. If it's any other card, it's probably worth $1 or less. So maybe you lost $1. But think about, in the context of losing that $1, how much mental energy and time you will have gained in return by having a much smaller collection of cards.
Yeah, I would argue, and we will go into what you can do with the cards that you are going to get rid of later. We definitely will, yeah. But I would argue that my mental health is worth more than 25-cent you're already dead.
Absolutely it is. And also, most countries have minimum wages, right?
Yes.
Even imagine, you probably have a wage somewhere if you work, right? You know what you get paid an hour. Even imagine, minimum wage. building a deck, try to just imagine for a second like you're being paid minimum wage for it. Hold on, this is a bad analogy. Because then you want the deck to take as long as possible to make the most money. No, it's more like, imagine how many hours you're spending going through your collection and how much money that would mean in terms of your wages. I'm not saying, go work instead. I'm saying, like, think of your time as being really valuable to you, because it is. That's why they pay you for the amount of time you spend doing something.
The expression of time is money. It 100% is. And especially for, people in my situation that work full time and have a lot of other hobbies and duties, like, between working full time, writing for this podcast, doing the admin for this podcast and recording, there's not much time that I have in between that. So I would like for my time that I dedicate to Commander, and we discussed this on the Burnout episode, go into the playing the game aspect of Commander, because that's the bit I enjoy most. So when I get around to tinkering with decks or building a new one, I would like the least amount of time to be spent on that. And that's just for me personally, and I know that there are a lot of other people that listen to us that are in that exact same boat.
Definitely. Well, even if like someone like me, I love building decks, and that's actually, if I have free time in a week and I can set aside some to building a deck, that's actually exciting for me.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you rather use that time and really truly enjoy it by not having to agonize over how many boxes you have to go through to find cards? Like, wouldn't you rather get to the fun bit of laying out the deck and going, oh, maybe this works,
and then noticing the combo or tagging them in Moxfield and going, oh, I have the perfect amount of card draw in this deck now. Like,
exactly. That's the stuff you're looking for, really.
All right. Okay. I'm more on board now.
Cool.
I'm getting in there.
Good. I have one more little minor soapbox bit before we get to the practical stuff.
Sure.
I play a lot of Pauper, as you know. I have many Pauper decks. I've watched a lot of Pauper gameplay. You out there with the huge collection of cards, most of your commons suck. They are terrible.
I was drinking water.
I'm sorry.
That was so brutal.
We've talked about this before. Packs are, in general, designed for limited, right? They can't make common cards busted all the time, or all limited formats would suck.
Draft would be a terrible environment.
Yeah, if you could draft 4 copies of the best card in the set every time because it was a common, that would be a bad limited environment. So they don't make cards like that. And I guarantee, if as someone who plays a lot of Pauper, if I was looking at, your huge collection of cards, someone out there, you've got this huge box of cards and you've got all these commons, I'm telling you, 5% or less of those Pauper cards are playable at all. Like, playable. Not even good. 5% or less of those cards are even playable in Pauper. The rest of them are dregs and would not even make it to the cut of a Pauper deck.
Yeah, it was interesting. We were actually talking about this, like, literally the other night. We were, like, looking at the new March of the Machine set and looking at the new commons from the set that are going to be playable in Pauper. And it's interesting. There are 2 cards that jumped out to us immediately. One is a functional reprint of Reckless Impulse.
Yep, so exile top 2 cards in the library, you may play them until the end of your next turn.
The other is a functional reprint of You Are Already Dead.
Yeah, there's the instant speed, destroy a creature that was dealt damage this turn, draw a card.
Yeah, and so those are the 2 cards that jumped out at us. Every other card that we were discussing, we had very, like, wavered opinions on. We're like, this could be played, but this is just objectively better in Pauper already. Or this, like, kind of does what you want to do, but isn't good enough at the rate. And so, like, this is like a March of the Machine specifically is a huge set with, like, so many new cards, and we're going to so many different planes. There's so many mechanics. It's a big anticipated set. But there are 2 cards that are 100% playable in Pauper from that, and they are functional reprints.
Yeah. I would add, like, 1 card. There's been 1 card I've seen in the whole Pauper season, which is the Convoke draw a card.
Oh, the blue ones?
Yeah,
that's
like
pretty strong.
Speed.
Yeah.
In control, like, fairy sort of decks that might be playable. But that's literally it. That's 3. That's 3 cards in the whole set that might even break it into the main top decks.
And even, like, throughout the entire last year's worth of Pauper, there has been, like, a couple of cards.
It's basically just been Initiative. Cards. Initiative has kind of broken a lot of formats, including Pauper, but aside from that, there's been very little change to the top.
And that was a whole new mechanic needed to be made for a common card to be good. So I hope that gives you a bit of indication that, like, even though you've got a lot of them and you're like, oh, maybe this can sit in a deck, it probably doesn't in Commander. No. I'm sorry. It's not good enough for Commander.
No, it probably is not. So look, if you are getting rid of cards, and I'd like you to, that's what I'm asking you to do, get rid of some of your cards. you should see if someone else wants them first. So you could offer them to a friend who's new to Magic, who might just want to have a bit more cards in their collection. I would actually prefer, if you can, to donate them to an LGS, so they're just like part of that sort of bulk box. You never know, someone might be chasing a particular common.
Because then that friend can go to that LGS and sort through the chaff and get the cards that they need, instead of just being like, here's my hand-me-down clothes, enjoy.
Well,
they stink.
The thing is that like new players don't understand what makes a card really good as well. So they get all these cards and go like, oh my god, I can build so many decks out of these. And it's like, it's almost, you're actually like kind of declining their overall ability to play Commander by giving them so many bad cards, because they're going to get a bad idea about what the format is like.
100%.
You can also do, a few people at our LGS have started little dollar boxes that they bring in.
I love this trend.
So this is really cool. So they've actually specifically looked up the value of the card and found anything that's worth like $2 or $3. And then they have a big box of cards and they say every single card in this box is worth $1. Like you can get it off me by transferring me $1 or giving me $1 in cash or whatever. And it's great. Like there'll be staples in there. There'll be cards like weird rares you're looking for in your deck.
Honestly, these dollar boxes have been like really surprising, because they are like I reckon the $2 to $3 Australian dollars worth of value of Magic the Gathering card. Every time a card sits in that value slot, it's like okay and playable in the right deck.
Yes.
So when you're looking at it in your own collection, you're like, I don't have a deck that this goes for. It's like, even though it's $2 to $3, I can't get rid of it because it's $2 to $3. It could be like, but if you put it in a dollar box, then you go to the game store. I've had this happen before where I've been flicking through someone's dollar box and I found a ridiculously weird multicolored card that goes perfectly in one of my decks. And I'm like, oh my God, I've never even seen this card. This is so cool. Here's $1. Let me take it. And gone, this is a $3 card that I had no idea existed from Khans of Tarkir. And now I've got it.
Great way to recoup a little bit of your costs there, for sure. Also worth noting that some people out there will buy foils in bulk, any foil card. The reason they do that is because they actually will remove all of the ink from the card. And then they can actually use that as like sort of a blank slate for drawing tokens or just various illustrations, because now it will be shiny behind. So basically when you strip the ink off at a foiled Magic card, it's just like a
shiny piece of
like a
cardboard.
shiny mirror basically on the cardboard.
I actually had one of my friends and one of our local judges, Violet, she basically she got a foil card, drenched it in this like paint remover, and then hand painted a curiosity for me on the card. So I now have like a really cool like altar that's foily. It's really cool.
That's really fun. It also has the added benefit of being sustainable. You're not wasting resources. Speaking of sustainability. Hey. We need to make sure that whatever strategies we're implementing, and this is across the whole episode we talked about so far, whatever strategy we pick for sorting our deck, it needs to be sustainable for you. So it needs to be like something you can continue to do without it feeling like this huge mental drain on you, or like you have to devote hours and hours of doing stuff, because that's what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah,
right?
well, because if you set up a system that requires you to do like 2 hours a week of organizing, then you're going to spend 2 hours a week of organizing, or you end up in the exact same spot you were before, like me, where there's a huge card pile on your desk and you're like, damn it, now I need to do 7 hours worth of organizing instead of 2. So this is the kind of equivalent of do something a lot, then you won't have to do something a lot.
Yeah, basically. And this is the part where it sort of ties into a little bit of my real world philosophy with organizing things. There's a fantastic saying, a place for everything and everything in its place.
Like that one.
And this is basically how I keep my collection of cards. So when I get home from the game store and I have cards from a pre-release or a draft or whatever, I immediately sort them straight into my boxes so that I don't start developing this big pile of cards that I have to be organizing. And this is exactly how I organize my house. My house, people come over and they're like, oh my God, Walt, you must spend hours and hours cleaning this to make it look like this, because everything's sort of really neatly tidied and put away.
It is meticulously clean in here.
Thank you. I clean really, really rarely. In terms of like putting on the gloves and getting the vacuum cleaner out, like a proper like clean. I do that probably every fortnight.
Yeah.
And the rest of the time I'm just doing really simple things like having a spot for my keys, my wallet, like all my important stuff.
Yeah.
As soon as I get home, I put everything back in its place. And likewise for like using things in the kitchen, I just like wipe them when I'm done. like
Yeah.
literally 30 seconds or something, but it means that I don't have to do this thing of sitting down and agonizing over it, which is exactly the same as with the cards.
I mean, even the top chefs will say clean as you go.
Yeah.
Like, while something's on a simmer, take the other pots and pans that you've been cooking with and wash them in the sink now. Because then once you've cooked dinner and you've eaten dinner, you don't have to wash up.
Yeah.
And I actually find, I'm similar to you, I try and keep things organized. But when we revert it back to cards, I currently now have a big pile of cards. And I say it's big. It's probably no more than, I'm going to say 300 cards. It's probably no bigger than 300 cards.
Right.
The way I used to do it, and this is probably testament to the fact that I've just moved into a new place and not had much time.
Sure.
I used to have a small box that was probably like a deck box kind of size, so maybe like 100 cards.
Sure.
And I would have a rule. I used to have this as a rule where that box, when that box fills up, that's when I have to do it.
Oh.
So I never did it immediately because I know I'm not as disciplined as you, for sure. Like, you get home and you're very disciplined. You put your coat on the thing, you put your wallet in the key bowl, you do this and that and the other. I do that with like keys and wallet and stuff, but like with Magic, when I get home from the game store, I'm usually very tired and just want to go to sleep, whatever.
Totally fair.
I have a box on my desk that is now overflowed, but I used to, and I think after this episode, I'm going to go home and clean. But it would be a rule that when that box would fill up, that's when I had to do the organization. And honestly, like that card box with like 100 plus cards in it, like maybe 120 was most. It would take me no time at all. Yep. With the organization system that I had, 120 cards would be in, away, and in boxes like that. And most of them would not even make the cut. As I would be organizing, I'd just be like, right, that's a dead pile, that's a dead card, dead card, dead card. Right, I'm keeping this. So usually, I'd only put away and organize like 30 cards. But the other 160, gone.
Yeah.
You know?
Beautiful. I love that. Well, yeah, I can tell you that the sort of conclusion of all of these different techniques is that I have 4 small boxes of cards, and I mean small, like in terms of those.
When you buy Card Kingdom, that's what the boxes come in.
Yeah, like, the boxes come in this sort of like, if you can imagine those long boxes you see all the time. These are about half that size, maybe a little bit shorter. I have 4 of those that have all the cards that I don't own. That so aside from cards in decks, all the cards that I own are in those 4 small boxes. Yeah. And it's great. You
have a binder. You have a binder.
And I do have a binder. Yeah. I do have a binder for trades and expensive cards and that kind of thing. So, all Magic players should have well-reasoned processes for the storing of their cards to ensure that trading and deck building can be done easily and without stress. Any system can work for this goal, but some systems are much more logical and sustainable. Do not let your cards become a burden. Take actions now to ensure that your collection is organized and lean. So, Space Commanders.
Command received. Okay. Feeling good after this one. I've been in a bit of a limbo with life recently. I've been working a lot and working really, really hard. But over this Easter break, I'm taking a week off. Nice. I reckon that pile of cards is going to be gone by the end of this week.
Love that. Well, to you listeners out there, do you feel commanded? How do you organize your collection? And will you be changing any of your techniques or your methods now that we've asked you?
And I'm really keen. I asked in the first half of this episode how collectors organize their collection. I know that there are a lot of people out there, and I'm thinking of some of our listeners that I've had a chat to on our Discord before. I'm really curious. You have like huge binders and lots of stuff. How do you organize it? I know some people organize by the actual code for the card, like the set number and the card number.
Do a bit of research for this episode, and there's a great Command Zone episode which is linked in the show notes for this one, because I did have a really good listen to it. But yeah, there was someone who went by the set code.
That is insane. And you've got to be dedicated to follow that.
There was some pretty hefty cons, I will say, immediately from having watched that episode. It depends a whole lot on how much of a collector you are, I would say.
Well, if you wanted to talk to us about this episode or about any of our episodes, you can send us an email, you can add us on Twitter, or the best way to talk to us is actually joining our Discord and chat with us and other members of our playgroup. It is a really active Discord. Each episode gets a good chunk of discussion now. And for our Patrons, they have a private stream that they can jump into and chat directly with Walt and I.
Speaking of, don't forget to check out our Patreon page, which is linked in the show notes, for more ways to support the Get Commanded podcast directly. It's really the best way to support the things that we do and help us to make more amazing content. Lots of little goals that we've outlined towards the bottom of that page. So have a look at those for sure. We would like to personally thank Fletcher Cutting for supporting us in the Space Commander tier. You're the best, Fletcher.
You are absolutely the best. And yeah, with the money that we get from Patreon, we're dedicating it to this podcast. So you really are supporting the content that you love. We're dedicated to making our stuff better and finding more ways to do it. So it's going to a good place because you're going to be listening to us. And we'd like to very much thank, and quite on the nose for this episode, big thanks to Palms Off Gaming for sponsoring this podcast.
Yeah.
These guys are incredible place to go if you're wanting to organize your collection.
Definitely, if you're looking for binders, deck boxes, sleeves, they're very much a collector's kind of hub.
For sure. If you have really expensive cards, they have like a top loader binder.
Yeah.
So you can have your top loaded cards that are in like Perspex cases in a binder.
Definitely, if you're looking at blinging out your binder in any capacity, that's going to be the best place to go to check out for
sure.
all that. So you can see them at palmsoffgaming.com.au. So, as is tradition, all that's out of the way. We do need to planeswalk out of Magic and into somewhere else, and it's your turn. So
Yes.
where are we planeswalking to this week?
I'm very keen to planeswalk here. It's still nerdy, still high fantasy, like is Magic the Gathering, but we're going to the plane of Hyrule.
Oh, the world of Zelda.
Yes, and Link and all the Gorons and the
Ganondorf.
the Rito. There's so many cool races and things to find in Hyrule, but I specifically want to go to Hyrule because I want to talk about the upcoming sequel to one of my favorite Switch games of all time, Breath of the Wild.
Oh yeah,
Tears of the Kingdom.
You literally just mentioned this to me before that this is coming out soon. I had no idea. Breath of the Wild is still selling for like $90 a piece because it's considered
Worth it.
An absolute masterpiece of a game still.
It's brilliant.
So, from looking at the trailer, it looks like it's very much
a sequel
to Breath of the Wild.
100%. Like, I think if you've been playing like Legend of Zelda games for a period of time, each game has kind of had its own twist of like kind of stylization and thematics and kind of the vibe of each game is really, really different. Like for example, Majora's Mask was like really different to Ocarina of Time, and like each game has been very different. Breath of the Wild found this beautiful slot in the Hyrule lore that it can just be like anything you want it to be, and I think it's gorgeous. I've recently been replaying Breath of the Wild to get ready for the new Tears of Kingdom game coming out, and I've lost myself in the game again. I just found out recently that there's this enemy called the Choo Choo. It's like a jelly blob thing that can attack you, and when you kill them you get the Choo Choo jelly. Now usually the Choo Choo jelly you can just use for like potions. You can use it to trade and get rupees for it and all this kind of stuff. I just found out recently that if you kill a Choo Choo with fire, when it dies it becomes red Choo Choo jelly. And then you can use the Choo Choo jelly. You have to go into like your items and then you have to specifically find the red Choo Choo jelly, click hold, and when you go back into the game, if you throw the red Choo Choo jelly and then hit it with an arrow, it explodes like a bomb. And it's like this hidden thing that the game doesn't tell you about at all. Like, there's no point in the tutorial. Realistically, there's not a big tutorial in Breath of the Wild.
No, from what I've watched, because I've only ever watched it played, I've been meaning to play it for years, and I'm definitely going to get to it really soon, because me and my partner just bought a Switch.
Yeah,
so
nice.
It's on the horizon.
Good investment.
The thing that really appealed to me was that watching people play it, it's very much like, decide how you'd like to play, and then there are so many, like, specific, micro branches of combat and
I know, it's
gameplay and movement that you can choose, and you can play basically however you want.
It's so cool. Like, I just found out that whole thing with the Choo Choo jelly, but now I've just found out, I was watching a bunch, because I was getting so excited for the Tears of the Kingdom coming out. I went and looked at the recent gameplay that they launched, like gameplay footage, and there's this new mechanic called Fuse in the game. You can basically fuse two items together and it gives you this weird effect. So, you can fuse red Choo Choo jelly to an arrow and make a bomb arrow.
That's fun.
It's really cool.
I love that.
I love how the game looks. The stylization of Tears of the Kingdom is very similar to Breath of the Wild. And
it looks like the same art style and everything.
Yeah, a lot of people are upset about it because they're like, oh, the graphics haven't been updated. But, like, it's really charming. Like, it's beautifully drawn. It looks, like, beautiful. Like, the amount... And it's impressive. The Switch can load that graphic really easily. So, like, you can see the entire world. Like, it's all rendered for you. You can zoom in miles and miles and miles away and it's all rendered. It's just a really beautiful game.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for the new one to come out.
Oh, definitely. I'm excited to play the first one now.
Yeah,
got me hyped.
I would be very happy to like walk you through the first little bit and show you like all the tips and tricks.
No, I gotta check myself in the deep end.
Do it all blindfolded?
I wanna work it all out as I go along.
I have to admit, it
Get
is
halfway
very
through
fun.
the game and then check in with you and be like, all right, what am I missing?
What am I missing? Have you learned how to cook yet?
Yeah,
you can cook.
The cooking I'm aware of. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's a really, really fun game. There's so much that you like find out halfway through that you're like, no one told me that you could do this, and now
Good
I can
games
do it.
do that, don't
Yeah.
they? Yeah. All right, that's about all we have time for, folks. So we'll catch you next week for more Get Commanded fun.
Goodbye, Commander players.